In a world of rampant materialism, consumerism, mass public psychosis, delusion, obsession with the superficial, and more, just chaos. A world which could end in so many ways, where every society could be the next civilization to fall. More than ever, we need someone like Art Bell. I'm not gonna lie, man. I fucking love Art Bell. And I started listening to Art Bell when I was maybe 12 years old. Always on YouTube, never actually on the radio. I gotta say, Art, you're one badass motherfucker. It's a shame he died. He was a heavy smoker. He smoked about 2 packs a day of Marlboro Ultra Lights, I think. And yeah, smoker's tip: don't get fucking lights, dude. Those perforated filters make it worse for you. Because the thing is, it brings in oxygen with the smoke, so you have to pull it deeper into your lungs to get that fucking nicotine hit. Stay away from lights. Anyways, back to Art. Art Bell, as far as I'm concerned, and I used to listen to a lot of Howard Stern. I've listened to Opie and Anthony. I mean, I think Anthony Cumia is one of the most vile human beings in the world now. And I think Howard Stern has just become this absolute fucking sellout. And in retrospect, his show was so immensely exploitative of people who clearly had shit wrong with them. And for someone who lauds therapy as much as he does, what he's doing for the people in his whack pack or whatever he fucking calls them, that's the opposite of therapy. You're encouraging their deficits or whatever. You're destroying their self-esteem on air for people to laugh at them. Howard Stern, fuck right off. You fucking pussy whip fucker. Yeah. My channel's definitely never gonna be monetized. But getting back to Art Bell, and speaking of Howard Stern though, I hate when Howard Stern fans would call into Art Bell. Baba Booey, motherfucker, Baba Booey. Because Art Bell, being the fucking renegade, midnight in the deserts, from the Kingdom of Nigh, fucking cowboy of radio, he didn't screen his calls, like Howard Stern. So what that means, essentially, for those of you who don't know, that means he doesn't have anyone who's listening to what the caller has to say first to make sure they're not going to just fucking call and drop an F-bomb. Art Bell just lets it slide, and if they drop a swear word, he fucking has to cut them off himself. Art Bell started out as, I believe he was a ham radio enthusiast as a kid, and then he was drafted to Vietnam, and he was a radio operator there, and then he started a political show, radio show in the 80s. He was a ham enthusiast in the intern between Vietnam and the 80s. And so this political show, though, because he has such an interestingly permissive but still skeptical approach to interacting with his viewers. When more and more people would call about conspiracies, and then once you started talking about conspiracies, more people started tuning in. And along came Coast to Coast AM. And Coast to Coast AM is just one of the fucking funnest things to listen to. Yeah, I mean, it's all fucking crazy people. But he's not exploiting them in the way that Howard Stern does. These people are, typically they give like a first name or whatever. So, they're not actually in the studio, like being filmed and shit. And, there's a lot of people who are, I'd say the majority of the callers are like legitimately mentally ill. But he hears them out. In a way, he is playing the role of therapist to them. He will, like, I like that he has a very, like, reserved and polite approach to skeptical questions that he poses to this person who's calling. Like, he's not in any way offensive or he's not an asshole. I'll put it that way. He's not an asshole about how he deals with these people. He just he gives a platform that allows people to be heard. And I thought it was really cool that he had this show Dark Matter for a while before he died, after Coast to Coast. He left Coast to Coast because he went through a lot of trauma in his life, and I believe that was probably why he decided to temporarily retire, because he for one, his son got raped by his teacher or something and got HIV as a result, which I could see that making you want to leave your hometown. And this was right after I think his wife passed away, because she had asthma, and like him, she was a heavy smoker. So I think that because she had an asthmatic attack and died. And then he went to the Philippines very quickly and married a much younger Filipino one. Now, a lot of people have been critical of him doing that, but I've actually known people, one of the greatest people I've ever known in my life. He, same thing happened. His wife died, and 6 months later, he went to Thailand and married a younger woman. I think this is a grief-driven response. And as far as I could tell, his family was happy. And it's I don't have anything wrong with that per se, unless the person's exploiting the other person and the other person really isn't into them at all. But I think it's kind of a mutual exchange. It's okay, you're from a poor country, and if you stay in this country, you're destined to probably live a poor, miserable life. But if you marry me, an older guy, we'll get to mess around, and I'll take you to the new world, and you can have a life, essentially. So it's this unspoken mutual exchange. And yeah, in many cases it can be fucking weird. There are cases I don't approve of, but particularly when it comes to someone doing this after someone else has died, a spouse has died specifically, I think that is a grief-driven response. And I don't necessarily blame them for doing that. It's how, I'm sure many of you have had pets die. Say you have a cat and it dies after 15 years or whatever, and, you rush to get a kitten. It's the same sort of, I think, motivation going on there. But in any case, I think, those were some of the driving forces behind him leaving Coast to Coast, and then George Snorri fucking taking over for him. I like George Knapp as far as people who have hosted Coast to Coast AM. I think he's got one of the most badass, like immensely epic poetic intros ever. Like what was it? Blazing through the night like a Shiraka, an atom of unobtainium into your eardrum, into your head, into your awareness, thinking its way into your mind. Like I'm paraphrasing, that's not quite accurate, but that's the gist of what he said, and it's like pretty fucking badass. But hearing from the Kingdom of Nigh, which is what Art Bell would say, I just, when I hear that, I'm like, oh, great, I'm about to listen to Art Bell. And, he's just like if you're someone who has trouble sleeping, I'd really suggest listening to his stuff, because, it's great stuff to just drift off to. And I personally, I like to listen to channels like Let's Read and Be Busta and stuff like that. I find that kind of like ASMR in a weird way, even though the stories are all Reddit Let's Not Meet or No Sleep, so they're scary stories, but they're all narrated in these really hushed, kind of passive and just calming tones. And I just really, I love that. And but the thing is, I will listen to it, and I typically won't fall asleep during the video. Another person I listen to is Mr. Ballin. I only just found out about his channel, and I enjoy his stuff too. I don't fall asleep while listening to it. I get kind of I start to doze off, and once it's done, the video's done, and they typically run about an hour, half an hour to an hour, I turn it off, and then for 5 minutes I just will start thinking about a story I'm writing, and I'll fall asleep. But with Art Bell, I'll actually, because the stuff's 3 hours long, when you look it up on YouTube, it'll just allow my mind to kind of drift off while listening to it. And all that does that. I don't know if you can hear that ice cream truck in the background. But one of my favorite things to listen to that he did, because he was very creative in what he came up with as prompts for people, like a theme that he would do for a show. I was listening to, and this was so entertaining. There's it's called the "I'm losing my mind" line, and there's one guy who was saying he thought he got bit by a vampire, and he just had this urge for human blood, and he was scared he's gonna drink human blood. And there's one guy who told a story about how his grandson, and he didn't have kids yet at this point in his life, visited him on his own motorbike from the future to tell him not to take this job that he was offered the day he called in Alaska. It's just really cool stuff like that you hear. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are just calling in and bullshitting, but there's some real gems. My personal favorite is Mel's Hole. If I get into the story, and I can tell you the story of Mel's Hole by memory, because I think it's one of the greatest stories I've ever heard, in terms of weird cosmic horror, and it's relayed in kind of the same, I think it's obviously fiction, but it's related in the same way that a kind of No Sleep story is, where the guy is talking about it as though it actually happened to him. If you want to hear me tell you the story of Mel's Hole instead of listening to it yourself, because it is a lot longer to listen to than what I can summarize he probably summarized all the stuff that he talks about over this span of multiple calls spanning like several hours. I think they probably encapsulate that into about 10 minutes, but it's seriously one of the most interesting things I've ever heard. And he has great guests, like he has Michio Kaku, Whitley Strieber, and just people who would otherwise be just written off as pseudoscientists or whack jobs. Like, he lets them on the show, and they typically have credentials too. Like, even though it may be like a weird credential, like a doctorate in fucking what do you call it? Parapsychology. Like the study of the paranormal. Stuff like that. And so it's always very entertaining to listen to. Another of my personal favorites that he does is Ghost to Ghost, which is what he does on Halloween. And Ghost to Ghost is essentially open lines where people call in and share their ghost stories. And I've heard some of the best ghost stories ever. Ghost stories for me, typically, I find very kind of like they don't really spook me that much. Not that much does spook me. There is serious stuff that has spooked me on Art Bell's show, like the Area 51 caller, the guy who called in and he was like crying and frantic and saying that he was working in Area 51 and let go on a medical discharge, and that the government's working with these interdimensional aliens who want to wipe out major population centers around the world, and that they're not the aliens we think of when we think of aliens, and they have malice for us, essentially. And then the satellite for the whole network gets knocked out as he's calling and talking to him. You just hear this kind of like powering down and then powering up sound. It was used in the Tool song, like Fate de Oed or whatever, fucking Off Lateralis. But personally, I don't like that version because it's just full of all these high-pitched, just whining sounds, that are like probably like that the guitarist is doing, and it just makes it like impossible to hear the guy. The Faceless used some of it in a pretty cool way in their song Planetary Duality Part 1. Fun fact, saw the Faceless live. It was fucking awesome with Cannibal Corpse when I was 12, and I was just moshing like a motherfucker, getting the ever-living shit beat out of me, Wall of Death, fucking crowd surfed like seven times at least. Watched a dude kick himself in the face. It was a good time, man. But anyways, back to Art Bell. Like one Ghost to Ghost story, just to give you a taste, and this really freaked me out because right after hearing it, I was listening to it while I was up in Alberta working. The area the guy describes in the call was almost identical to a little spot right across from the shack that I was living in. But the call, it was a guy who claimed to be a missionary or something like that, and he was going to visit his family out in the country, and he was driving around at night because he liked to drive at night. And most people listen to Art Bell are people who are truckers or whatever, insomniacs, or just driving at night because the show ran typically in the early morning hours. At least, time zones varies so it's, different around the world. But in any case, this guy says he was driving and he noticed that these horses were really spooked in this one field. So he stops and he's walking over, and there's a ditch with a pipe in it and a tree, which was like identical to what was right by the shack I was in. And then, you know, there was a stable too to boot with horses in it. He said he saw this, like, I think it was like a spectral glowing horse galloping towards him or something, and then it turned into a massive like ball of plasma, and like then shot into these bushes by the tree. So like, say he's like, here's the tree, here's the fence for the stable, and then the pipe, and then here, him, pipe, tree, stable. This thing shoots over into these bushes right by the tree. So he's about here, and it turns into two like transparent glowing people who are like rolling around and fucking basically, and then it moves up into this ball of plasma again and shoots into the pipe and out. And so he's like, you know, obviously like, what the fuck? And he walks up to the ditch and looks over into the pipe where this thing shot into, and out of the pipe comes these little, he said they look like hairy little monkey paws, and then a gray hairy face with that looked like a 5-year-old child with a really gray complexion, and his eyes closed and was kind of smiling, just looks out at him and then goes back into the hole. Like, holy cow, what a story, right? You know, it's just great. And then, you know, he also has these time traveler lines where people who claim to be time travelers like will call in, and there's some really great ones there. And you know, I don't want to make this too long, so I won't get into some of the stories. I could tell you them, but I won't. You know, he had one show where it was, I don't think it was planned for him to talk to this woman for 3 hours, but he did, and she was essentially relaying a story about how she was having a love affair with a reptilian with a really big dick. So I just found it so interesting that he just made the entire show you know, revolving around her story, and you know, encouraging her to share more and more details of her intimate encounter with this giant reptilian lover. Pretty wild, pretty wacky stuff. Like, where else are you gonna find something like that? I'm gonna find something like that on George Norrie's fucking show. Like, George Norrie is working for Gaia now too, I think, which is like one of the, like I get their ads all the time, and it's like one of the most obvious like new age bullshit fucking streaming services ever. Like, it's just streaming services for crazy people. It's a streaming service for crazy people essentially. But and it's just to reiterate how fucking devoted Art Bell was to his craft, and how much he wanted the listeners to be able to actually listen in. Like, when he did Dark Matter, he got Sirius XM. He got a contract with Sirius XM. And so I remember my dad got Sirius XM around this time. And just in the city, it had terrible reception. Like, it was constantly fading out. And as I said, a lot of Art Bell's listeners are truckers. So, you know, they're out in the fucking sticks, so their reception is just gonna be complete shit, you know. So, you know, a lot of people are calling in and complaining about this. What does Art Bell do? You know, and I thought this was pretty fucking, you know, punk rock. Like, he was like, hey, listen up, Sirius XM. You know, I've been the second, you know, most listened to, like, you know, or the second most syndicated radio show in the States, meaning, like he's right behind Howard Stern in terms of how many people were listening to his show. Howard Stern being the most popular in the States, North America in general. I don't know if he said those words, but anyways, he makes a demand of SiriusXM. He's like, if you want to keep me as a host, this is what you gotta do. You gotta refund, you gotta supply each one of my callers who's having reception issues with a free year's subscription and a new SiriusXM module. And these things weren't cheap. I remember they're like $150. Like now, like a lot of cars just come with them built in, but this was like back before that. This was back before, like Tesla cars and stuff like that. Or maybe when Tesla cars were like in their infancy. And only like a few people own them. And so what does SiriusXM do? And they're like, okay, fine, walk. And so Art Bella's like, fine, I will. And he continued to do his show like for free through ham radio and Periscope and what do you call it? It was like Zoom, but Skype. Like and that way people could call in internationally for free and listen to the show for free over the internet. Like what that shows to me is that he is someone very devoted to bringing his craft to his audience, and he's not motivated by the money. And I think that's a marking of a true connoisseur. And a true hero of radio. I really respect the man. I wish he was around to hear his 2 cents on everything, because like he just really had a grasp on things that were ahead of his time. Like I remember listening to him last night, and like, the racist guy calls in. This is the only time I've heard him like really get angry and yell at someone. And he said Black Lives Matter, and he was like, for that matter, all lives matter. So you should treat all people equally, sort of thing. And this was way before fucking the movement. And then he was also like right before he died, and Trump was running for president. He was, talking about just like how this guy's a maniac and he's going to do a terrible fucking job, and, look what fucking happens. Like, he really had his finger on the pulse of what was going on in America specifically. The world too as well, but, I mean, that being said, he did make some sort of false predictions, like he wrote a book with Whitley Strieber about how there's going to be a huge fucking like apocalyptic storm, like ice storm, as inspired the movie that the day after tomorrow. I remember loving that movie as a kid, and that hasn't happened in the time frame that he said it would. I mean, it could happen in the future, but it didn't at the time. But his ideas of stuff like the quickening, how do I fucking describe this? It's essentially just the idea that, oh, hello, Crow. The idea that, things are happening faster and faster and faster. And that's true, especially when it comes to the proliferation of information. Much of that being ascribed to the internet. I mean, some of what he says about it, like, I don't think is necessarily true, but in any case, like, I really admire the guy, and I miss him being around. I wish I could hear what he had to say. Like, I think just him being around during COVID would have done wonders for people's mental health, because when everyone's cooped up indoors, Art Bell's on, you know, you feel like you're with a friend. You feel like you're listening to someone who, if you were to speak to, would understand you and give you a chance to hear you out. You know, that's why I love Art Bell, and very much recommend him. You know, again, like a lot of the people he talked to and stuff were regarded as, you know, pseudoscientists. You know, like there's this one guy I just can't stand listening to who talks about how there's bases on the moon and Mars and shit like that, and just provides this really flimsy evidence for it. I mean, there could be, but I mean, the way, like what he provides is just like patently untrue. But yeah, anyways, it's something I would recommend going into with, you know, a skeptical mindset, not a naysaying, cynical, jaded mindset, but, you know, a nice balance between open-mindedness and skepticism, like Art himself displays. And with that, I'll say farewell. Thanks for listening. I just had to express something about this guy because I've got, just a lot of admiration for him. Anyways, catch you in the next one.